Welcome back to the Vires and Numeris podcast. I'm your host, RL Bryer. This is episode 56 with Sheldon Dearr, the tech lead at Octopus Network. Thank you for coming on the show today, sir.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry to tell you my title is downgraded to technical advisor, but my role hasn't changed very much. It's more of a, appropriate semantics for a restructure.
Okay, fair enough. Technical advisor at Octopus Network. Uh, so I've been following Octopus. I didn't know about you guys until a couple months ago, really. Like, started looking into you a little bit closer. I'm pretty big advocate of Near. I'm getting more into Near protocol. Actually, Near and Cosmos are probably my two favorite ecosystems. So it definitely makes sense to talk to you guys and what you're doing. Find out more what you're up to. But like, I always want to get a little bit of backstory before we dive right into the crypto stuff. Where are you from? Are you American, Canadian? What's your backstory? I think you're living in Asia. I don't know how much you want to reveal here, but what tell us a little bit about you.
You're good. I appreciate it. So I'm from Miami. I'm here now, but I'm hopping over to the East pretty soon, and I'm going to be backpacking around there. I do have a pretty decent community in Miami that I like. Real people who work in crypto, not so much the glitz and glam that's normal for fintech events in Miami. But yeah, I'm born in Miami, raised American, and very sad to see what's going on with the current regulatory climate. But let me not jump ahead too far too fast.
Right. Fair enough. Okay, so let's go. Now we got to get right into the crypto origin story. How did you find the crypto sector? Was it Bitcoin? Was it Ethereum? What was it?
So it was definitely Bitcoin. I read the white paper really early. Local news in Miami actually announced it back when it happened. I thought that was really amusing. I was already interested in politics and sort of anti-corruption kind of stuff, and I thought it was really interesting. And I read it, not being a network engineer yet, and was like, wow, there's no way this is going to work out. Years later, I've studied up. I'm a network engineer. It's 2013. I'm working for a company that has access to some pretty expensive tooling to see network traffic globally. And someone does malicious mining at a business where I'm, responsible, where I'm the sort of security administrator, if you will. And it's my job to root that out of the client's network. And in doing that, I only had cooperation from like one other organization, Cato Networks. And I just, in doing all the research for that, I saw, wow, this isn't just the thing that I read about a few years ago. There's people risking their lives with windsocks to tunnel through the Great Firewall of China to run this network. People really, really care about this. So that was just a light bulb moment for me. I've been pretty involved ever since. 2016, I started popping up, actually, voicing some opinions and trying to be helpful. But between that period of late 2013 and like middle 2016, I mostly just did research and read stuff and tried things in a small lab.
So you got the bug pretty much around 2013 and never left. Is that pretty fair to say? Or
December 2013, roughly. Yeah.
okay, very very nice. Um, that was when I started getting more. I found Bitcoin pretty early on, but that was when I started getting pretty around the Ron Paul 2012 era. I started getting more and more into it, and I think we had sort of the same epiphany that maybe this is going to work, and maybe the governments aren't going to come after everybody that owned Bitcoin. That was sort of a different time. So moving on to the Octopus network, when did you guys launch your mainnet?
So mainnet went online October 8th, 2021. So a little over a year old now. And there was a brief period where we didn't have anybody active on mainnet. So the contracts did exist. The UI was, viewable. There wasn't necessarily anything to see. But we decided not to have a state mine kind of chain at launch. So we are considering having, a tooling chain that we operate that's part of the ecosystem. But because we didn't do that at the front, there was a, small gap. And then I think a month later, the first chain launched, and that's the Bio network. So that's a, med health concept. It's a really reliable network to validate because it doesn't have super bursty traffic. It's kind of consistent. So yeah, that was a really great chain to start the network with, and they've expanded their offering to include some, let's say, private health data solution to make it less wordy and more direct. The idea is that instead of going to a SaaS application and giving up something like your period data, monthly health data that's kind of precious to you, you could, go put that into a public piece of encrypted a blob. You're really just piling into somebody else's encrypted DB and saying, okay, I'm going to put my information here because it's safe for me to go find it when I need it and not when somebody else wants to see what I'm doing.
If you guys launched that chain, would that affect your relationship with Near at all? Or
No, no. I think that actually, funny you mentioned that. Right as we were starting, I was just getting off of a live with Cryptocito from Cosmos and Ilya from Near. So the IBC conversation is live and well. I need to get back in that comment section and say something. But basically, the IBC journey at Octopus got slowed down a little bit because of some misunderstandings about block finalization, but it's still in progress. ICS 10 and ICS 11, Composable is still trying to validate them. We're still trying to work on different tooling that's both relative to that and, letting us sort of move on while waiting for that work to be validated. So yeah, Near is going to be a really interesting place for IBC and not just for Cosmos. So yeah, I'm really excited for those NEPs that are coming out right now.
yeah, that's definitely cool. I didn't have that on the list, but these kind of questions pop up as we go. So, can you for the people that aren't, I mean, you're probably going to talk above my level. I know you are, as far as development and stuff. But what are just for the people that don't know, what are substrate-based applications and specific blockchains or app chains?
Sure. So to make things reasonably compartmentalized, the Web3 Foundation is kind of the supervisory organization above Polkadot and Kusama. So Dotsama is kind of the known substrate ecosystems, and that's perfectly reasonable. That is, the native place for that, right? Their model is for parachains and for larger solo chains. Effectively now, yeah, you can run a solo chain there and just, mint an extra 30% of your token and sell it off as part of the auction to get that slot. That's perfectly fine. But we wanted to make an offering that's designed for really small scale entities so they have a place to sort of pre-launch. It's like production launch, but production launch with parachain palettes and a full product is definitely more complicated than pre-launch with just what you want to do and some pre-built integration with Near. So roughly our mission was not to ever replace Polkadot. We know that we can't, but in our ecosystem, 2 and 4 core validators are very normal, relatively small. I think the biggest validator in the ecosystem is Fuzhou with 8 gigs of RAM. Like it's not supposed to be a, high risk, high reward or high security, high uptime ecosystem. It's designed to be a risk mitigating, fair ecosystem for places that can support smaller projects. It's not that Kusama and Polkadot can't support these things; they overtly can. But we're trying to do it with a sort of easy button to usher more projects in, and that is going to include Cosmos SDK in the near future.
Uh, with what is it called? IBC, the security. They're working on that where these new chains can like tap into the security model of the overall Cosmos ecosystem. Uh, is what is it in the near side that makes their security something? I know that isn't live yet on in the Cosmos ecosystem, but what is that? What is this sort of what is the consensus or what is the security model around near that makes it similar to that or a good partnership for you guys basically?
So Near's modularity was really friendly to us at a pretty low level in the stack. So the idea that we could, run Rust logic, even if it had to be async with, some callback structure between different contracts, that we could get a pretty decent, a series of functions, effectively not a virtual machine, but like, a lot of different things going on between these contracts, really cheap, really effectively, budgetable long term. I don't mean to flip over and sound like a total shill for Near, not that that's anywhere besides my regular posture, except that we couldn't have done this in a lot of other ecosystems. And people frequently ask, are you planning to leave? Do you think that you'll, jet off from Near at some point? I really don't see that. I think that if someone made a magic easy button for containerization, it would still not make sense for us to leave Near because the modularity is what's so valuable for us. Like, the on Near, you can do things that are, 100% remote. You can do things that are, 100% remote. You can do things that are, 100% remote. You can do things that are 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 100 segmenting security, which is really different from what Cosmos chains do and the way that substrate chains will finalize blocks, right? So near being a central arbiter based on how scalable their security model is, which if you want to think about it in a physical sense, is more like, okay, I need to, dot a mile's worth of road. Okay, do I want more dots or do I want one straight line? Like the idea that you would fill up security with a series of smaller dots is sometimes much easier to implement, has different benefits. You can choose, oh, okay, I want exactly at these 3 millimeters to remove these few dots. That is the kind of modularity that I think is why Near is going to end up being not a hub, but a place where IBC will make more sense for Polkadot, for Cosmos, for Ethereum, for a bunch of different places. Someone brought to my attention the other day that the Ethereum Rust client is starting to get updates again. So I think that that's really what we're dragging forward is not just IBC, but IBC with a high level of reliability and efficiency, which is pretty commonly going to come from Rust runtimes or Rust modules of some type.
Great explanation. I appreciate you getting into that. EVM versus substrate. Can you explain the major differences?
I can. So there's an important note that I'll include, which is there are some substrate chains where you connect with your MetaMask and they look like they have a regular 0x this and that. They basically have a regular substrate chain under them. If you want to look that up in documentation, it's called proxy accounts. But basically, it means that you have a system of substrate accounts that are native to that chain, and then stuff on top of it. Not to distract from the differences, but in the sense of talking about similarities, there is some pretty significant overlap. The next chain that's supposed to be launching at Octopus has been working with some EVM palettes. We're not sure if they're going to do the full MetaMask implementation. They've already tested it, but there's still some questions about that with different wallet providers. On differences, I think the most clear thing is probably block finality. So on Ethereum, after a block is confirmed, confirmations continue, and after I think 30 confirmations, most people say that's good enough. I'll call that secure. It's not always really like considered acceptable at that point, but that's, let's say, common. If you're talking about substrate and time, that is wildly different because while that 30 confirmations can occur over 30 blocks just linearly in time, the finalization of a substrate block can occur 12 hours later. It can occur a month later. If the chain is overwhelmed the entire time and there is still not settlement being completed, like in total, epoch to epoch, then it makes perfect sense that you would say, okay, well, these transactions have been initiated, they've been validated by the network, but they haven't been affirmed or attested effectively yet. So it's not that block finalization is inherently good or bad. Near has some properties about this as well. It just handles them really fast, so people don't really notice. The flexibility in that sort of like beginning and end of a block is great. It's not really how IBC was designed because IBC needs to see you complete a transaction completely. It needs to see it settle and be accepted as like finalized, right? It shouldn't be reversible after that point. So that is not to get tangled up back in the past, but that is effectively the misunderstanding from before that Interchain Foundation had with us and a couple of different other folks who they were, looking at IBC implementations and how we were going to help get that done. But coming back to your point in your question, sorry, the main thing is that Ethereum is designed to be more linear and straightforward and self-contained, where Substrate has things like off-chain workers. You can integrate other parts of what's happening on the node. Like I talked to the SSV guys, and they're doing some similar sort of integrations where you could have, off-chain or chain adjacent things that are on the same node. But that's really the positioning that I feel Substrate has effectively is not to try to replace a monolithic L1, but to be a much more modular, much more customizable, smaller chain for a specific purpose.
Very nice. Yeah, we're gonna get more into interoperability here in a few moments. That's something I'm definitely very excited about, and I've been excited about for years. So that's another reason I was excited to talk to you because I've heard you talk about interoperability quite a bit. Did you guys actually get funding from Near or the Web3 Foundation? That's something I don't know.
Sure. So we did get funding from Near. It was 5 million US in Near. I'll be completely forward that as part of the restructure is that we were caught between needing to convert some of that into dollars and not wanting to liquidate on top of our, biggest donor. So we mismanaged the bag a little bit on that. It's part of why we downsized. But Near is effectively the largest donor at 5 million. An interesting way to learn about what our raise was like is that the other 4 million or so, I think it's 4.5, maybe four and change, comes from, I think, either 35 or 40 different entities. So, to be crass about it, I do sometimes say that we received people's fuck it money because the idea that someone would, go into a investment pool with so many others, they're clearly willing to let that investment sit. It's obviously an investment they can afford to lose. Like we know that we are a not a dicey bet, but a sort of long that some people have made, and I think that's actually really appropriate because our whole model is to be helpful for app chains in a way that is moderately unique and moderately altruistic. So putting that together means, okay, how are you going to become cash positive in the immediate future? We're not. It's just not our plan. So because of we didn't have this conversation that was, hey, here's how we're going to make you rich. There was a different conversation with venture, how this makes sense, how developing an ecosystem means other projects and products fit into it. The conversations with venture were wildly different. And that's part of why I'm proud that our biggest investor is Near because it shows that they do believe in the technology that we're working on. And if you look at the GitHub repos, like it is quite a lot.
Okay, very nice. Yeah, I'm just like I said, I'm getting more into what you guys are working on, and it's exciting. But I don't claim to be a scholar yet. That's why I'm talking to you today. Um, do you guys have your own accelerator program?
So we did. Unfortunately, it's on ice at the moment because we're restructuring. I would very much like for us to keep it, but realistically, it is difficult to keep it in a down market. We did run it for 2 quarters in a down market, and there were lots of people who benefited from the accelerator where we got no benefit back. Personally, I'm fine with that. From an org standpoint, we were fine with that. But to do it for an extended period of time, under that sort of liquidation crunch or, social liquidation crunch, if you will, with the largest investment we had, I think it's likely that we won't resume it for a while. I think if it's going to resume, then keep an eye out for it in Q3.
Makes sense. I think we're turning the corner here into, I think we've probably already begun the next bull market, and people are trying to figure out whether that's true or not yet. But I have a non-financial opinion that it is. We are in the cusp of that. Let's see here. Is moving on. I don't want to take too much of your time today, but I'm going to take a little bit of it here. App chains. How many app chains are currently working or running on Octopus?
Sure. So there's five in prod right now. There's the bio, the health concept that I mentioned before. There's Fuzitao that I also cited. That's probably the busiest and most volatile chain. That is DeFi tooling. So some people get confused because we're disallowing DeFi for volatility purposes, but DeFi tooling is acceptable. Discoval is a curation DAO. They had to sit idle for a little while to sort of build up their pre-prod audience, but it's literally just people having DAO grade interactions about content. Um, there's also Atocha, which is a puzzle platform. The idea being that you need to incentivize other people to solve puzzles if you create them, and there is always a computer science grade need to make better puzzles because at some point we have to solve them and computers can't be able to. Um, what is the oh, and Myriad? I'm forgetting the one with the largest footprint. So Myriad is a social platform. They're working on some really interesting improvements with Federation. So I believe they are the largest user base with I think 50,000 accounts and 30,000 verified users. It got very popular in Indonesia, and that's where some of the team is from. So basically, it's a social platform with built-in tipping and Twitter integrations where you can treat it like a sort of monolithic Facebook-esque environment, but you can also treat it like Mastodon and run a validator and use that to drop an entire federated service of your sort of, side chain, if you will, of the social network. So
So, so
there's some interesting concepts working with us.
yeah, I heard a little bit of that when about what's it called again? Myriad?
Myriad. Mhm.
Myriad. I heard a little bit about that one when I was in preparation for talking to you today. That is the one that you said, like you said, with Twitter. But can you do that with? Can you like integrate Facebook too, or other social platforms? How's that work?
I think they have other integrations that aren't as sticky. Like
Mhm.
you can do redirects back and forth, but knowing that somebody visited a web page is easier to do on a Twitter API with a little bit more forgiving.
Right.
But the I think the more critical integration isn't on the OAuth side or on the old school API side. It's that you can log in with their wallet, any Polkadot wallet, an Ethereum wallet, or Near.
Oh,
So kind of cool that you can be an anon on that
Right.
platform if you want to try it out, but also, they wanted to accept as many people log in as possible. I like that.
I really enjoyed Steam, and then which turned into Hive. I'm still on there. I haven't been
Mhm.
on it a lot lately, but I still think it's like the cool. I don't understand why more people haven't taken that leap, but I guess it's just all a process.
I
Uh,
think it's gotten split up a little bit between like Zero X and Mirror and a few that are, not working on similar models, but like have a similar culture of rewarding the author.
yeah, it's very cool. I also heard in an interview with you in preparation for this that DAGs and blockchains are not inherently Web3 technologies, which I tend to agree with, but I want to hear what you have to. I want to hear you elaborate on that more.
Absolutely. So, if you do background on me, you know that I come from a Fortune 500 background, working with corporate clients. P0 incidents where more than 10,000 people are affected by a network problem of some type. So, coming from that world makes it hard for me to wear a 100% cypherpunkism grade hat, right? Like I can't just say, "Hey, we have to, literally torch and pitchforks people out of the data center." Like even if I felt that way, nobody would hear me if I said something like that. I don't actually feel that way. But in sort of splitting away from more radical misunderstandings about decentralization and all these other buzzwords, there has to be real conversations about what private blockchains are, about what private systems are, about what it means to, run a private system over a public blockchain. So I think that the read, write, execute mantra that I'm trying to push on Web3, because I think that's a very hard definition that we could actually stick with. I think that that means that um, the inherent operators of the platform have to be involved and governance actually has to be effective. I think that does fit most ecosystems right now. Like it's not so common anymore that you see like a few thousand people vote against a governance action and the dev says, fuck you, I'm doing it anyway.
Right.
It's not that common anymore. So I think that's the threshold really is that are you building a system that has a profit model that is designed to, bring value to you, and therefore you need to control the system to make sure it runs properly, or are you developing code that other people run such that they participate in the network you design and everybody benefits? Like without sounding like a blockchain hippie, I think that the use case for that stuff is real. It's really important, and it's the new generation of sort of social revolutions or velvet revolutions. But at the same time, companies that need to manage security between three different entities and not inherently trust one of them, they exist. There's not a lot of them out there, but Corda deployments, even Hyperledger, which I do tend to talk shit about. Like these things have real use cases that are meeting needs in enterprise business. So I think it's important that we recognize not just that there are these two things in existence, but
Mhm.
that in bringing about DAGs that are interesting, or by bringing about blockchains that are super powerful with high levels of parallelization like Solana, we should be asking the question, who's actually running these networks? How much do they care about, me being on it? Like, what does it mean to them? Am I just their client or customer? Am I cannon fodder? Do I have a voice here?
Great explanation. So this would be more like you're saying, these things are trust minimized, they're not trustless. Like there are these parties, these private entities involved. Is that kind of like the what you're saying there?
Effectively, yeah. It's not to point a finger at any certain product. It's to say that if you choose to, retain control of what you're working on and you specifically want to make it for, that old school purpose of trying to turn a profit, then congratulations, you're a fintech product in the blockchain space. I'm not mad at it. There's a few of these, but it's also important to recognize the difference between, I can't just participate in X network when, I think it's critical that the sort of not regulation of it, but the culture on it, the way financial transactions are controlled on it. Like there's no point in going right back to just, hey, Bitcoin is better. Let's only have this one conversation. I did come from Bitcoin, so I recognize that's one of the highest security chains. But also, if you're, applying other use cases that are not necessarily relevant to the single, source of truth, or, Bitcoin is gold narrative, then the question is, how else do you want data to operate in this method? Like, do you have five other public partners that all need to see you post this message at the same time and know that it's posted at the same time? Okay, cool. That's a great use case for a private blockchain or a public blockchain where you're operating with private partners. So I think that this is going to be fuzzy for a good long while, the same way that it was in the early 2000s when people weren't sure what how did they know that I was on this website and then they advertised me to this? I feel like it's a similar misunderstanding curve. It's going to take years.
So do you think, like, not to go too far down this economic talk rabbit hole, I guess, but are these privately produced public goods basically? Is that kind of what you strive for, or do you not want what is your take on that?
Well, I mean, to skip some of the stuff in the middle ground and just say what I think is effectively the solution for this stuff, to say that we're going to keep treating open source as this, I'm going to hit you and you're going to give me code kind of industry, that's the main thing that we can't not solve and expect this paradigm to change until venture and, just big bags of money are not able to operate in the space the same way that they are now, then it's not going to change. I don't mean that to say that, if you have money, you're bad, but simply put, there isn't a effective incentive or, any sort of fair system that helps someone who produces an author's code to not just be responsible for that, but to be rewarded fairly for that when other people borrow their work. When you get plagiarized in writing in the US, there's also not that much you can do, but you can, as a publisher, say copyright this and that, please enforcement this and that. We have to figure out what that's going to look like in a new world where we don't want central governments doing enforcement.
Very true. Let's hope the market can figure it out. I have a lot of faith in the market personally. We'll see. You guys are shifting gears a little bit. You guys are comprised, your network is comprised of like 40 something smart contracts. Is that correct? How
I
long
think it
does
might
it,
be 37.
37? Okay. How long does it take for you guys to write one of those specific contracts? Like, what is that process like? I'm curious.
So their template right now, they do get custom modifications. For example, one of our secret menu items is that you can permission one of those app chains via an NFT registry. So if you issue an NFT on Near Protocol, you can use that to limit the validator set of who joins the chain. Kind of an interesting idea. But to give you an idea, that is one of the only non-template actions that we need to take to operate the contracts, because for the most part, these are templates that we had audited. So Halborn was our major audit partner that I'm happy to work with. Those guys were super knowledgeable. I'm still learning from them. If you don't know Halborn, they also write the SANS courses. So when you go get a blockchain enterprise architect to work in your Fortune 50 business, odds are they went to training that was run by Halborn. So really happy to work with those guys. Basically, to to lean on their clout just a tiny bit, they did audit those contracts. I believe there are revisions since they are very minor, but those audits that were done, they are really clear about the centralization risk, which is really the only thing that was left after the audits. So I think effectively there's the anchor contract, the registry contract, there's a helper contract, and I think one other type. So it's, a handful that go with each chain, and then a handful of ones that are just, affirming registry entries and, keeping up cron jobs and little things like that. So this this process of issuing contracts is almost always template for us. We specifically don't want to be authoring new stuff when we're deploying somebody else's chain, with an integration with Near, because we feel like it would be unfair to them unless they cooperated with us really in depth about some customizations. And we do consider them. One of them coming up, which is going to be an adjustment for the rest of the contracts once it's confirmed, is NFT bridging. So we've been working on that for quite a while. We had a demo at NearCon that kind of sort of worked, but it's been a work in progress for a while because it's effectively not dependent on a relayer, and you can retain the royalties while bridging off of Near and coming back, which hasn't been done by anybody else yet.
So this would be a bridge between you, or what would the bridge be between?
Just to between Near and the app chains themselves.
Okay, cool.
So you can see it right now on testnet if you want, testnet.oct.network.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out. Very interesting. Does it keep you up at night working on these bridges?
From a security standpoint, no, because I work on trust minimized bridging. So it actually is super easy to sleep at night and just know, oh, okay, I reviewed this already. Halborn's reviewed this already. Odds are low that we've missed something. Additionally, we are making changes to switch the bridging over in Octopus to IBC based, but right now it's MMR based. And with that MMR process, which stands for Merkle Mountain Range, it's just making sure that two hashes match every 60 seconds. So in the sense of not being able to sleep at night due to bridge flaws and stuff like that. If there genuinely was a problem, that bridge would be unusable within 60 seconds.
What is that?
So
Some sort of advancement of the regular Merkle tree or something? Is that like, or is it the same exact thing?
it's really just a even numbered Merkle tree where you're specifically not looking for primes to move around and structure stuff. You're just saying, okay, I have a root hash that was generated by one entity, and then two people took that hash and went to other places and pivoted from it. And then, okay, now that we have stable hashes in two places, we're going to use those as a reference and iterate hashes every 60 seconds based on that.
Interesting. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I had to ask that while I was still in my I was thinking about that.
No, you're good. It's a custom RPC that's on the substrate side. People ask that as well. We didn't magically redesign Near. We just made sure that the substrate chain can see Near effectively and have a sort of nested function that the chain operators can't control that will automatically lock stuff down if it gets mismatched.
Very cool. Okay, back to like thinking about this more of like what do you call it? Blockchain hippie what did you call it?
That's me personally. Don't put that on Octopus. That's not fair.
No, no, no. Well, let's just talk about this is more of a question for you, I guess. So we have to separate what we're talking about here.
Just
Uh
slightly.
yeah, yes, slightly. Do you personally view like I guess I have to ask it under as you view Octopus Network as a vehicle to end maximalism because I've seen you kind of talk about being anti-maximalist and I'm like the most anti-maximalist person you're gonna meet. So I'm curious if that's how you feel about it.
It's definitely one of the things that I really had freshly in mind when I joined and was like, yes, okay, the point is application specific stuff. The point is efficiency. The point is scaled security. Like I do see it as part of the journey. I will be on this journey no matter what, but I think that Octopus has a very specific role in that journey because they had already been doing research on some stuff. We were already pre-aligned on some things. Like the places where we deviate on the ideology of this are moderately thin, but on those places, Octopus has told me as long as I'm not causing problems, and this is sort of a group consensus, then I am supposed to have some, not sovereignty, let's say, but some individuality to express my opinions and try to further an end to tribalism in general. I think that app chains are like just very vaguely and generalistically, they are a path to ending tribalism. When monolithic L1s were the only understood narrative and that's the only real option, of course, we're all in these silos because the only bridges between them are, high risk. They have, weird trust dynamics involved, all this stuff. I
Mhm.
think that, if the cosmos of crypto or if the internet of money looks a little bit more diverse to not just be these large blobs of, okay, you're home on this planet and you live here and that's it. Like I do think that is a mission that Octopus is on anyway. I think that the way that I see it might be a little bit differently, but at the same time, there's stuff that I can't tell you about what we're going to be releasing that shows that we are really aligned at Octopus at a shared vision of making sure that IBC is useful across multiple chains. Just to end it, if you've seen this recent graph, I can't remember who it was from. Singularity was it? Somebody collected data on popular ecosystems, and the top five ecosystems, including AVAX, Cosmos, Polkadot, Ethereum, and Near, they all have IBC projects running. EOS also has theirs running now too, or I should say Antelope because it's new name. But I think that the need for IBC tooling has never been higher, and it's only going to keep increasing. There has been some unfortunate things that happened here and there. I mean, I do want to see more from Thorchain. I am sad about what happened to Sif. I'm definitely a fan of those guys. They've been working hard for a while, but there's a lot of let's say misunderstanding that leads to collateral damage in the space. And I don't think that I'm some, savior of knowledge or whatever silly egotistical thing. But I think that if a series of us can figure out how we align on interoperability, on things like data standards, on how we want to see this space being, wholly independent from fintech, like yes, VC is necessary. Yes, thresholds back to traditional finance are necessary, but we're still looking at an environment, I think, where Bitcoin is kind of its own conversation and Ethereum and friends is this, venture rich place where stuff happens. And don't get me wrong, I'm super happy about that stuff happening, but in this tangle, there is the open source conversation and simultaneously, the need for a bunch of us who've always been trying to get the tribalism out of the way and just make good products and have reasonably good infrastructure to build them on. I do think that is ending. Octopus is in total aligned with me. I would say probably like 97%, and that's without me adjusting any of my moral compass arriving here.
Yeah, I mean, overall, it just seems like that's what Octopus Network is to me. Like, it just seems obvious that that's something that would be important to the people that founded it and stuff. Obviously, we said you're not speaking for them, but definitely is interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about how the token functions within you guys' network?
Yes, absolutely. So right now, the main functionality for the governance token is that holding it lets you basically veto anybody who wants to join. So there is a community endorsement required for someone to launch an app chain with us. It is a permission process for manually auditing, et cetera. But in order for us to get into that and spend that human effort, we want to make sure that we have buy-in from the community. In an ITSM world and a different kind of perspective, I could explain how it is appropriate to make sure you have buy-in from people who you're doing business with, right? They have to believe in what you're doing if your finances are entangled. In this case, our finances are security, so it's definitely entangled. Um, the I'm sorry, I got distracted. I lost the thought
Oh,
there. This is a little bit of an
about the token. About
yes. So
Sorry,
the
I pulled
governance
this
being
up.
important.
You started talking about the audit, and I had this diet about how you guys vote on not the audit, but the voting process. So I just wanted to pull that up while you were talking. Didn't mean to distract you.
No, no, I appreciate it. You're good. Thank you so much. I just realized that I hadn't seen this document since it was updated. It's a little cuter than the last time I saw it.
Okay.
So, um, the main purpose, I think, from a genuine retail perspective, that you can buy one token and have one vote is that. But on the governance side, we have integrated AstroDAO directly. So you can sort of compare this to Spree and Polkadot World, though it's not a one for one thing. We have locked up effectively some of our economic variables into an AstroDAO. So that means that a DAO on Near, running under the Sputnik contract with Astro as the front end, that effectively is what controls the OCT minimum for staking in the network, which we'll get to as the next use case in a second. And also how much is the minimum deposit for a delegator. So we were able to control those things ourselves. That was the first thing that we moved over. Instead of something non-critical, we picked something that was like, hey, linchpin economic value. That's what is now DAO controlled officially on chain, et cetera. The other use case that I glazed over there is validation. So in order to validate on these chains, you do have to stake OCT. So that is a little bit of a different model for most folks, but you can kind of think of it like DOT, where you are locking up another asset as security and getting another asset as reward for providing that initial asset. So that is a really critical use case that you can, run a validator for 5,000 OCT, which is relatively affordable today. Minimum delegation is 200 OCT. You can see the details on docs.oct.network about the staking, but overall, if you look at how slashing works, slashing only happens when malicious blocks are affirmed. So we do effectively have fraud proofs in production, which a lot of people are working on, but we just have a really lightweight, simple version of it. And that makes sure that if someone, tried to push a bad block into consensus and then establish that in an ongoing chain, that they would be removed from the validator set and their total OCT slash moved into a governance wallet. The last role of OCT, which I think we have also on the table for the restructuring that we're doing, was the sort of macro DAO, or I think it was called the Octopus Committee in the white paper. If you hold more than 1 million OCT tokens, you clearly have enough skin in the game that you should have a higher than average voice on how the protocol has changed. So we were looking at a DAO structure that had, I think, maximum 21 individuals at 1 million tokens each. I think we may change that variable, but for right now, effectively, if you want to propose changes, you can do so on forum.oct.network, and we welcome that and appreciate that. But if we are going to expect that sort of larger level of governance influence, then we do want to see a pretty large holding of OCT. There are some changes that we are considering, both with the economic integration of OCT and Near, and OCT, how it's used in our ecosystem. but we have to hold about that for the moment. I can't tell you too much yet, but I'll have an update for you in the next couple of months.
So right now you can run a validator for like $300 or something like that. Is that correct?
I think
Fairly.
5,000 times 25 cents,
Oh,
so it's like
5,000,
1250.
5,000. Okay, yeah. So we're looking at close to 1,500 or something.
Yeah, it's very affordable, and delegation I think right now is like less than 100 US or something.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. Very interesting.
the whole model is not designed to get rich quick. The design is for stable revenue, mitigation of risk. The idea is not a welcome place for, giant funds who need to
Right.
make their 3x, but for people who want to lock up their assets, still have them over a period of time, not be harmed by inflation. It's a decent tip. We're also a non-inflationary asset, so I should point that out, is that we are a flat 100 million token economy. So that means that we are walking up to a supply demand squeeze over time,
Right.
but I'm not trying to encourage people to buy OCT, so I don't necessarily jump into that.
Yeah, with 66.9 million currently in circulation, if CoinGecko is correct. Uh, Definitely, that's a big deal because a lot of people don't understand tokenomics, and they get into these inflationary projects that just have no hope, really.
Just a quick side note to not cut you off. If you look at the rates that are in our ecosystem, they're not sexy. But if you compare them to rates in other ecosystems minus the inflation rate,
Right.
they're almost one for one.
What is the
So
what is the APR? What is the do you know?
they do vary based on how many people are validating and delegating.
Uh-huh.
Because you have a pre-posed how much rewards are going to be given to the chain, and that's divided up depending on how many people are there.
Mhm.
But they can go as low as 1.5. I have seen them as high as 30, though I do expect them to come down at 30. I think that Fuzhou might still be showing over 20%. Fair warning, Fuzhou is a volatile chain. In order to compete and be productive on that chain, you do need a decent level of hardware, a relatively fast network. If you just run your gaming PC on that chain, it's probably not enough. If you just run your gaming PC on a more quiet chain like the Bio, sure, you can participate, operate the chain, and it'll work just fine.
Very cool. Just a few more, like four or five more. Maybe I'm trying to
Sure,
work.
sure.
Um, I heard you. Let's. Oh, I gotta skip this one. We'll go back. What you guys? So you are you working? Is the idea eventually to turn it over to a DAO, or what? What is the idea?
So we had DAO V1, V2, and V3 on the roadmap last year, and roadmaps change. So we had some setbacks and we could not go DAO V3 last year, but we are effectively in DAO 0.1 right now with that little, one linchpin function responsible for a DAO on Near that is not majority controlled by us, right? Our investors are there. I think Ilya is a voter on there. There's definitely different people from there who are not us. The goal is definitely to turn over the majority of the ecosystem to shared operation. In my words, 51% by 2024 at the latest, August 2024 at the latest, because that's when the last OCT token will be unlocked from vesting between initial investments and others.
Okay.
So I think that's the really the worthwhile horizon, because we were trying to do it really fast, but in the sense that we've slowed down, I want it to be really worthwhile and make sure that we're not, completely, discarding DAO V1 to launch V2. We're probably looking at a holistic and complete launch closer to the end of the token release. So it is effectively already in place, but in the sense that we'll be asking people to participate in it, that's going to come later. I do want to include the asterisk on that is polling. Something that I like very much that's happening in DAOs these days is that you can have a vote with weight. You can change weights. You can have different weights, but also you can have a vote with no weight. I think that's really important to show up and say, hi, I'm nobody. You literally don't know who I am, but I like this proposal. Clap, clap on Steam or whatever else. I'm sorry,
Right.
on Medium. But
Yeah.
yeah, you get my point. I think that is a valuable step that we're going to be taking, not just to get more structured as a DAO, but to be a little bit different as a DAO that shares sort of business responsibilities with the community and, does need their buy-in pretty actively.
Very good. This is more of a personal question because I heard, like I said, I've listened to you a few interviews preparing for this. You talked about value being subjective. So are you like an Austrian theorist, or did you read? Are you like did you go down the Austrian school of economic, or is this just like something that you just you believe without reading the Austrians?
So I'll give the disclaimer that there is almost no basis for this, but my rough basis for this is that in like sort of being a kid and learning about modern monetary theory and learning about how soft power works and watching politicians manage the dollar, I did ask something like, hey, what physically happens if we destroy more dollars and destroy less dollars? And in asking questions, gamified USD, that is ultimately what led me to subjective value, not because I thought that I could take a dollar from one corner and sell it somewhere else for 110, but because I thought that the value of the dollar was significantly different wherever I was going. And I was really motivated by not necessarily globalism, but global convergence through the internet. So the idea that $1 pays significantly less for, let's say, a worker in the Philippines versus what it pays for a worker in the United States, I was definitely thinking about that as a kid. And it's not that I'm like altruistic or some other weird thing. It's that my value schema is relativistic by default. I think I followed that up with some of my explanation about successes that I don't think you ever actually reach it. It's something that you might just feel in the moment, but you're supposed to keep going. If you did something good, then people probably need you around to keep doing something good again, you
Okay.
know. So that's basically my model is just that the sort of inherent value conversations, the static value conversations, they don't include time.
It's interesting. I've never heard it. I've never heard it explained like that. So that isn't. I mean, I believe value is wholly subjective. So when I heard you say that, I was like, oh, this guy maybe he reads the Austrian school, or he's read the Austrian school. So I had to ask you.
I
Uh,
should I should read for sure. Thank you.
Start with Murray Rothbard, Man, Economy, and State, and then maybe go to some of Mises' work. Um, Other than the obvious utility that Octopus Network provides, what other methods of incentivation are you guys basically doing to get people to want to launch these chains?
So this is something that I was really forward about when I first got here is like, hey guys, we're entirely dependent on this very, interesting technical grade speculation. And we are effectively still in that category. I think that the Cosmos conversation expanding is going to make that easier for us. Simultaneously, I think Web3 Foundation and other entities are getting used to the idea that the substrate ecosystem is not just Datsama. That Datsama is great. It is what it is. It's supposed to be the pinnacle of the substrate ecosystem. There are other solo chains that are doing really cool and interesting things. The idea that they have made it from 0 to 1 right now frequently includes funding from W3F. Totally reasonable, not scalable long term, not a reasonable way to, maintain a distributed concept long term, whether that's decentralized business or a foundation or whatever. So our model in helping other app chains launch is a lot about our helping hand. It's a lot about getting one-on-one support and not having to pay a contractor for that. Obviously, we want to make sure that you don't need too much of it, but at the same time, the ongoing support between releases, between different versions, support on testnet to make sure that stuff that launches in prod is actually safe. Like our main, I guess you could say, issue in audit is the centralization risk. I really see that as our feature and not our bug. We're going to be looking at that in different ways because, of course, human trust is not, looked on kindly in this industry, and it shouldn't be. It's a terrible linchpin. But at the same time, it is just the same way that started with, Ethereum and other entities that we have to have a chance to spread this out, to get other people to buy in, to get other people to come in as operators, to make other people effectively the deciders for the protocol. So there is a lot of different narratives you can find out about the DAO and how we've said we want to transition things. Part of that includes a committee of folks that would be someone like me, someone like our architect, or some of our key ops guys. Like I could definitely see us being participatory in the implementation of changes long term, but also long term, we really want the buy-in of other ecosystems, and that means that we have to give up control of this thing. So we're really motivated for that. The enticing part, because to come back to your question and not just steamroll you with other things, the enticing part also includes the infrastructure offer, which I'm really big on. This is also something that did come under fire a little bit in the restructuring, but I'm sure that we're keeping it for existing chains. The offer might change a little bit in the way that we index and offer explorers for Cosmos chains, but that extra infrastructure of an explorer, an indexer, and at least one RPC endpoint with a validator of last resort, that is a really, really incredible safety rail. And I think that Cosmos and Web3 Foundation can provide these things, but they're not supposed to because they are the direct providers of this software. They're the direct auditors and arbiters of this stuff. I think that having an independent party like Octopus, whether we're going to make modifications or not, to be that middleman to make sure that we're offering this, that we're including those safety rails, that we do try to help people get funded when they have good ideas. Like it doesn't mean that we are this new generation of multi-chain ecosystem that I think some people might want to push. I think that we are a reasonable multi-chain ecosystem that wants to take advantage of lowered or minimized trust in the right places and make that a benefit for smaller entities so that people can actually launch their projects and not get caught up on money
That's a good
or really
explanation.
the effort. Like not even the costs of running Explorer, but
Right.
the manpower it takes to make sure you've got two people on staff all the time that are keeping infrastructure going.
I don't think people realize how much work that really is, probably. Actually, I know they don't. Yeah. The follow up to that, real quick, is a lot of the stuff I watched was probably 8 months old. I know you guys had you were offering like between 100 and 200,000 OCT for some of these app chains that pass the voting and they audit the voting and all this stuff. Is that still ongoing, or was that sort of cut out when you mentioned the stuff earlier?
So, to my understanding, that offer is still up for 200,000 OCT tokens. That's within the first 10 chains that launch with us.
You got
So,
five now, right? So that would be the remaining five would still get that as well.
yes, exactly. So, the idea is that in launching those major chains, because they are the earliest ones, it's not that they need to be more important or are more important. It's just responsible for us to make sure that there is OCT in the market, not just available for them, but liquid and moving around. People are going to participate in DeFi. People are going to manage the market how they want to. If there was a squeeze in OCT at that time, the value of our token rises, the value of their token gets under an even bigger exponential squeeze. We don't want that. So we do make sure to increase the sort of liquid retail token supply, when that happens. And I think that is reasonable, especially for smaller scale products. If you're talking about launching like a monolithic L1, that's kind of unreasonable. But for launching an application specific chain, if you are associated with a token economy, for them to kind of be like, okay, you're ready to launch? Okay, cool. We're not just going to force you into the existing liquidity. We are going to let you have your own kind of space. Like, I think it makes sense.
It's a really good opportunity for people that want to build right now, because that's $52,000 right now. It could be 5 million here in a couple months or something crazy. Um, Moving on to the last couple here. How do you Okay, back to interoperability. How do you think about Web3 like in 2030 and 2040? Do you think that you and I, our sort of vision, not, we have a very similar vision, I feel like, for interoperability from just what I've gathered today. Do you think our vision wins out, or are we just the crazy, people that are, hoping that it plays out that way?
Yes, and so I think there's a really reasonable 2030 where you have someone like an Infura partner who offers an application that is your doorway to DeFi. I don't necessarily like that. I think that's not actually a super great trust model, but there are already people deploying this, and not very many of them are successful. But I think that the player to watch out for, that people are going to orbit around a little bit more, is XLR, because building really rich backend tooling and good bridging and just reasonable validator based multi-chain networks,
Mhm.
I think that there's going to be a more obvious, like, okay, I download the app on my phone, I go into the SaaS application in the browser. There's going to be a lot more of that, but also with Near using a local storage in Chrome for the browser wallet, and some really interesting innovations coming from other chains as well. Like a lot of people don't know that you can actually use a substrate chains wallet, an SS58 wallet in browser. It's a pain in the ass, and there's some significant security challenges, but Saito still does that. You can show up on their little arcade, their website. They automatically generate you an on-chain address. You can earn tokens and do stuff with that on-chain address. You can throw it out or you can keep it.
Saito?
Like SAITO.
Yeah,
So
They were actually the last podcast I recorded before this one. I
Oh,
had
no
David,
way.
I had David Lancaster on here a couple weeks ago, or however long ago. Yeah,
I'm a
it's,
fan. They do great work. Like
yeah, it's
I
interesting.
think I think like the way that they saw the UX change while saying, okay, if even if you degrade trust, even if you degrade security, it's still a big UX bump. And that's a lot of what people are looking for. I think that's going to be the first phase of this market change where we get dragged into Robinhood, but not really. And hey, look, this does Uber, but also it's a little bit more interesting. Like I do talk to a lot of different founders who think about what the next application suites are going to look like and what the next applications are going to look like. And from a monetary perspective, I have said this for a while that I could see it as kind of like a color wheel as, oh, I want to pay in Doge or oh, I want to pay in Bitcoin or I want to pay in this because, this is a level of importance to me and therefore I want to pay in this asset. But I think that that comes alongside a different world where our fringe becomes more normal to a large group of people who are sort of not nomadic, but like, a little bit less connected to their local environment, a little bit more citizens of the internet. Simultaneously, people who are a little bit more locally bound, they're going to stick with the easy UX, integrates with their local restaurant kind of applications. So my threshold that I've been telling people to look out for is 2025 because that's when I expect UX to really just unfold. And I use that word because I think that the automation of visual design and the automation of front ends is coming. It's it's already templated in some funny ways,
Mhm.
but I think that that's what's going to drag into that period where we do have to be a little bit more conscious about what we're operating, why we're already there in the sense of you and I being careful about what's under the hood. But I
Right.
think for regular users, that understanding is going to come after a world of hurt in, okay, here, look, here's an easy application. You don't actually know that it's crypto. They give you some Ethereum and then you go buy an NFT and then you're great. Congratulations, you have an NFT. And then what? you know, there's still some of that happening. I think that people have figured out that they need to have something to do after, whether it's staking or a leaderboard or, hey, look, you automate party with a little video clip that shoves your picture into it. You know, silly things, valueless things, but I'm still expecting that UX is sort of the path forward because it's the most common way that people are seeing to bring retail in, besides giving them what they genuinely want from a better than SaaS app perspective. That's the next tier up, I think.
This wasn't on the list, and I want to sneak this in. So just answer it really shortly. What do you think? What do you think about blockchain gaming? Do you think it will take off or not?
I think that it's a mistake that play to earn would define blockchain gaming, but I think that blockchain gaming will take off in a different format, which is more like cross-compatible items, marketplaces that are linked together through Ethereum or other capital markets, or data message, message passing from one game to another. Like I think that the play to earn model was totally reasonable. That's how they would start by, chumming the market by paying people to come play. But at the same time, there is no game that people play like that now that is, more than 1 million users that I'm familiar with. The opposite is true. Clash of Clans, when it was really a huge, huge game in the early 2010s, was my like, oh hey, I'm on my break. I can do a little phone game thing. I saw so many people, not just from my job, but in general, like going online and spending lots of money to play these games, making a game addictive and having people get into it, not just pay to play, but pay for skin or pay for transaction to save your very special item that was unique in that game.
Right.
I think there's a lot of functionality that's coming, but the capital market part is a little bit, the threshold. We have to get through that first.
It doesn't seem like they figured out the tokenomics and how, yeah, the entire money model of it yet. But I do think that it's coming eventually. It might not even be this cycle, but I think I agree with you. I think eventually they'll figure it out, probably though. Okay, last question, sir. Um, Thank you for your time today. It's been very interesting talking to you. I appreciate it. And my last question is, I ask everyone this, and since you're working for Octopus right now, I have to ask you. It's two tiered. What does Bitcoin mean to you, and what does Octopus Network mean to you?
Okay. So I like to say Bitcoin is the beginning and the membrane. Bitcoin is the new point of demarcation where our radical ideals can live on the other side, but can still touch Bitcoin and live in the traditional fintech world. So I think that Bitcoin being this thing that can be worthwhile for us in a completely abstracted digital universe and simultaneously having enough data to be legally compliant with governments that are trying to figure this stuff out, I think that's effectively the role. Just disclaimer, my life savings is basically in Bitcoin. I have different, funds in different places, but Bitcoin is my largest asset by volume. And I'm probably going to keep it that way for an extended period of time, not because the network security is high or whatever, but because I do believe in this idea, and I think that this idea makes sense, and I think that it has like worked out well enough to proof of concept itself. And that's all that was really necessary. Yes, it's possible that this turns into a giant, nation state chain and all kinds of things like that. But I think that that's effectively what we want, even if we're getting away from, developers who we believe in, who are making changes that we want to make. I think that Bitcoin is still the threshold to a world of more creativity, more flexibility, different trust models, et cetera. I think that Octopus is a pretty important point of those different trust models, because app chains with minimized trust is something that Cosmos kind of sort of talked about, but also it was like not below a certain threshold, because otherwise it's not worth it to have lots of little $50 liquidity pools dotted around the hub and stuff like that. So I think that the way that I see Octopus is part of the journey I was already on, to make sure that tribalism goes down, to make sure that friction between different digital asset platforms in general goes down, and to make sure that the way that digital asset platforms grow in the future continues to make sense and be, let's say, first principles, and not, okay, we need to be compatible with this old thing. We have to make sure we do this way, blah, blah, blah. Like we are always going to have to be sympathetic to what came before us, and I will be. But I think Octopus is a pretty good measure of how we are, taking first principles from people who have already taken first principles away from Bitcoin. And that means that we just have to, keep bleeding this line that is misunderstanding, that is, let's say, kind of blinders on and stuff like that. Like I do try to pull people together from different ecosystems, not because kumbaya, but because, hey, really straightforward. I need to talk to you guys. We need to have a conversation about what NFTs should look like that can go across multiple chains, or what it looks like when someone does something that you think is nefarious or, in question on one chain, impacting somebody else in another place. Last year at ETH Denver, we had some of these productive conversations. I'm definitely looking for folks this year at ETH Denver, whether this comes out in advance of that or not. And I think that each year that there is a, major gathering of that sort, which surprise is going to keep happening, we inch closer. So we're getting there, is effectively the way I mean to say it, is that the Bitcoin and the membrane belief system and that model means that we do have an indefinite getting there to do. But that first threshold of getting there is establishing different levels of trust, minimal KYC, minimum viable KYC, those kinds of things are in the pipes. So I'm quite hopeful.
I like the way you think, my friend. You're an interesting guy. I hope I get to talk to you again sometime.
Be a pleasure, absolutely.
Yeah, hang on one second. I'll say a proper goodbye. You got any, before we go, do you have any links you want to drop here? I think everybody probably saw I think it's Network. Do you have any personal, like Twitter, anything you want to drop?
I go by my pseudonym Artemis Leeton. I'm the only Sheldon Dearr on the planet, so if you spell my name and look me up, you'll find me. But yeah, I do just really want people to look under the hood and consider how the nitty-gritty affects regular people. And yeah, I don't have a call, but you can definitely find me on Twitter. And if you have questions about Octopus Network, please feel free to throw them at Twitter. We don't want easy questions. We want the good stuff.
Excellent. Hang on one second. I'll say goodbye. Thanks again.